RFK's speech after King was killed is one of the most moving speeches you'll ever read or listen to or see.
He was coming to a rally. People were coming to show support for him. They didn't know that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. He was on the plane. They found out. The speechwriter wrote something. He thought of some stuff that he wanted to say. When
he first announces it, there are just gasps in the crowd.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee.
Bobby Kennedy, who had to do what most of these speeches never touch on, he had to worry about what kind of violence there would be, what kind of demonstrations there would be in Indianapolis where he was speaking, and what could he do to dampen that.
We can do well in this country. We will have difficult times. We've had difficult times in the past, but we will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness, and it's not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings that abide in our land.
Bobby Kennedy, as the Attorney General, had worked very closely with Martin Luther King, and so he felt like this was in part his responsibility. This is just genuine, this is heartfelt, this is him talking to a nation, a man who had on his own done a lot in working for civil rights and working with many of these folks that were gathered, activists and so forth.
He has to establish a connection with people in the audience. And how does he do that? He does something that politicians really never like to do, which is go delve into the horrible moments in their private lives.
For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man.
That's the kind of line you would never hear in a political speech. But what he was trying to do was say, look, race isn't always at the base of these tragedies, though, of course, in that time it was.
He really puts it out on the American public that, hey, you know, we've got two ways that we can deal with this.
You can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, black people amongst blacks and white amongst whites, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend.
What he managed to do was be honest, use his personal life for a good end, try to be sensitive to the audience. So what has impressed me about that speech is not the language part of it or the great rhetorical technique, though there is some. It's what it said about his character, you know, what he was willing to do to try to dampen the threat of violence and how moved he was by the moment.
The famous thing about that speech is the result that while there were riots across the country in major urban areas that night, there were none in Indianapolis. And that's got to be attributed, at least in part, to Robert Kennedy's speech.
I'm Charlton McIlwain. Subscribe to THNKR.
Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss.